You can tell a lot about a person by what they do with their last $5. The neon open sign buzzed weakly against the rain-soaked windows of Rosie's Diner just off Interstate 84, casting trembling red light across the empty booths and cracked black and white tile floor. It was 12:47 in the morning, and the place smelled like burnt coffee, bacon grease, and exhaustion. Outside, cold November rain hammered the parking lot hard enough to blur the headlights passing on the highway beyond. Inside, almost everyone had gone home except for a tired waitress wiping down menus, a cook half asleep behind the grill, and a woman sitting alone at table 9 with her hands wrapped around a coffee cup that had gone cold hours ago. Ethan Cole noticed her the second he walked in. Not because she was beautiful, though she was in a quiet, distant kind of way. Not because of the expensive wool coat folded beside her or the diamond watch she clearly wasn't trying to show off. No. Ethan noticed her because she looked like someone trying very hard not to fall apart. He pulled off his rain-soaked delivery jacket and rubbed a hand across his tired face. 12 hours hauling packages through freezing rain had left his shoulders aching and his knees stiff. His old boots squeaked softly against the tile as he walked toward the counter. "Coffee?" the waitress asked without looking up. Ethan nodded once. "Black." The waitress filled a chipped mug. "You're cutting it close tonight, Ethan." He forced a tired smile. "Story of my life." From the far side of the diner, the manager glanced toward table 9 and sighed heavily. "Lady's been sitting there almost 4 hours, he muttered. "Ordered 1 coffee and hasn't touched it since midnight." The waitress lowered her voice. "I think she's crying." "I run a diner, not a shelter," the manager snapped quietly. "We close in 20 minutes. Ethan looked over again. The woman quickly wiped beneath her eyes and stared down at the untouched coffee like it was the only thing holding her together. There was something haunting about the silence around her. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just lonely in a way that felt familiar. The manager grabbed a towel and started toward her table. "Sir," the woman said softly before he could speak, "I'll leave soon." Her voice carried the kind of exhaustion money could never fix. Ethan looked down at the few crumpled bills in his wallet. $5 and some coins. That was supposed to buy breakfast before his morning warehouse shift. The manager folded his arms. "Ma'am, we're closing." Ethan stood before he could think twice. "Put her coffee and pie on my tab." The manager blinked. "Ethan, you serious?" Ethan slid the last bills from his wallet onto the counter. "Yeah. Man, you can barely feed yourself." Ethan glanced toward the woman at table 9. "Maybe tonight she needs kindness more than I need breakfast." Silence settled over the diner. Even the cook looked up from the grill. The waitress slowly poured fresh coffee while Ethan picked up the warm slice of apple pie himself. He carried it carefully across the diner and placed it gently in front of the woman. She looked up immediately, startled, pale blue eyes glassy beneath the dim neon light. "I didn't order this," she whispered. Ethan shrugged lightly. Nobody should drink coffee alone looking that sad. For a moment, she just stared at him like she had forgotten how kindness sounded. Rain rattled softly against the windows behind them. Somewhere near the highway, a truck horn echoed through the dark. Then the woman's lips trembled, and a single tear rolled silently down her cheek. Ethan gave her a small nod, the kind strangers give each other when they both understand pain without needing to explain it. Then he turned toward the door, unaware that the lonely woman sitting at table 9 was worth nearly $3 billion, and that within days, she would quietly change his entire life forever. By the time Ethan Cole pulled his aging Ford pickup into the apartment complex, the rain had softened into a cold mist that drifted beneath the flickering parking lot lights like smoke. The engine rattled twice before dying completely, and for a moment Ethan stayed still behind the steering wheel with both hands resting against the worn leather, eyes closed, listening to the ticking sound beneath the hood. The dashboard clock read 1:38 in the morning. Too late for rest. Too early to start worrying about tomorrow, though he knew he would anyway. He grabbed the small paper bag from the passenger seat, climbed out into the freezing air, and made his way up 3 flights of cracked concrete stairs that smelled faintly like bleach and cigarette smoke. Apartment 3B sat at the very end of the hallway beneath a buzzing fluorescent light that never stopped flickering. Ethan unlocked the door quietly and stepped inside. The apartment was dark except for the soft yellow glow of a lamp beside the couch. Lily had fallen asleep there again with a blanket wrapped around her shoulders and a coloring book spread across her lap. Her small inhaler rested beside her hand. Ethan's chest tightened the second he saw it. 9 years old was too young to know the difference between emergency rooms and regular hospitals, but Lily knew. She knew what ambulance sirens sounded like at 3 in the morning. She knew what overdue medical bills looked like stacked across the kitchen counter. And worst of all, she knew when her father pretended not to be scared. Ethan knelt beside the couch and brushed a strand of blonde hair from her forehead carefully so he would not wake her. The television murmured quietly in the background, some late-night rerun nobody was really watching. Lily stirred slightly. "Daddy," she whispered sleepily. "I am home, sweetheart. Did you eat?" Ethan smiled softly even though his stomach burned from hunger. "Yeah. Biggest burger in Oregon." She smiled faintly. "Liar. You caught me." Her tiny fingers curled around his sleeve for a second before sleep pulled her away again. Ethan stayed there longer than he meant to, listening to her breathing. Slow. Uneven. Fragile. Finally he stood and walked into the kitchen where the reality of his life waited beneath the dim overhead light. Bills covered nearly every inch of the counter. Hospital statements. Final notices. Red stamped envelopes demanding immediate payment. One paper sat separated from the others like it carried more weight than the rest. Foreclosure warning. Ethan stared at it silently while rain tapped against the kitchen window. 10 days. That was all the bank had given him before they began legal proceedings on the apartment lease debt and truck loan combined. 10 days before he and Lily had nowhere left to go. He opened the refrigerator. Half a gallon of milk. Eggs. Leftover soup. Nothing else. Quietly, he reached into the cabinet above the sink and pulled down an old metal coffee tin. Inside were folded bills and loose change he had been saving for Lily's winter medication refill. Ethan counted slowly beneath. The yellow light. $84.17. Not enough. Not even close. His jaw tightened. Across the room sat a dusty cardboard box he had not touched in nearly a year. He walked toward it carefully and lifted the lid. Inside were pieces of another life. His late wife's scarf. Old photographs from county fairs and summer road trips. A silver necklace. And beneath everything else, her wedding ring still resting inside a tiny velvet box. Ethan stared at it for a long moment as thunder rolled softly somewhere beyond the highway. Then slowly, almost painfully, he closed the box again. Some debts could take your money. Others took pieces of your heart one payment at a time. And somewhere across the city, sitting alone in a penthouse filled with more wealth than she could spend in 10 lifetimes, Claire Whitmore could not stop thinking about the exhausted single father who had spent his last $5 to make sure a stranger did not cry alone. The city looked different from 40 floors above the ground. Cleaner. Quieter. Colder. Claire Whitmore stood barefoot beside the massive glass windows of her downtown penthouse while dawn slowly bled silver across Portland's skyline. Rain streaked softly against the glass, blurring the streets below into rivers of white headlights and distant movement. Somewhere beneath all of it were ordinary people beginning ordinary mornings. Parents driving tired children to school. Waitresses opening diners before sunrise. Delivery trucks groaning onto wet highways. Claire watched it all with a silence that had become painfully familiar. Behind her, The penthouse glowed with soft recessed lighting and expensive stillness. Marble floors. Abstract paintings. Shelves lined with awards carrying the Whitmore family name. None of it felt like home anymore. Her phone buzzed across the kitchen counter for the 6th time in 10 minutes. Claire ignored it. Finally her assistant's voice filled the voicemail speaker automatically. Claire, the board meeting starts in 45 minutes. Investors are asking about the acquisition announcement. Please call me back. Claire closed her eyes briefly. Acquisition announcement. Such clean corporate words for something that felt like betrayal. In less than 24 hours she was expected to finalize the sale of Whitmore Capital, the billion-dollar investment company her mother had spent 30 years building from a tiny accounting office into one of the most respected financial firms on the West Coast. Reporters called Claire brilliant. Ruthless. Untouchable. But none of them knew the truth. Since her mother's funeral 6 months earlier, Claire had barely slept through a single night. She moved through meetings like a ghost wearing designer clothes. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every conversation sounded hollow. And after her former fiancé leaked private company information for money before disappearing from her life completely, the last fragile pieces of trust she still carried had quietly broken apart. That was why she had gone to the diner that night. Not for coffee. Not for food. She had gone there because for one reckless moment she wanted to disappear into a place where nobody knew her name. A place where nobody wanted anything from her. Claire walked slowly toward the kitchen counter now and picked up the small wrinkled receipt she had smoothed flat at least 20 times since midnight. 1 coffee. 1 slice of apple pie. Paid in cash. She traced the faded ink with her thumb while remembering Ethan's tired eyes beneath the diner lights. There had been no hesitation in him. No calculation. No recognition. He had looked at her like she was simply another human being carrying too much pain. The memory unsettled her in ways billion-dollar negotiations never could. Another call flashed across her phone screen. This time it was Daniel Mercer, the lead attorney handling the Whitmore sale. Claire answered reluctantly. "You missed the conference call," Daniel said immediately. "The board is nervous." Claire stared out at the rain. Maybe they should be. A pause. "Claire, if this deal collapses now, the press will tear you apart." She gave a tired laugh without humor. "They already do." "Where are you?" Daniel asked carefully. Claire looked down at the receipt in her hand again. "I honestly do not know anymore." Silence lingered on the line for a moment before Daniel spoke softer. "Your mother built this company because she believed good people still mattered, Claire." Claire swallowed hard. That sentence landed somewhere deep inside her because for the first time in months she had actually met someone who proved it might still be true. Down below, the city continued waking beneath the storm clouds while Claire Whitmore stood alone in a penthouse worth more than most people would earn in 10 lifetimes, unable to stop thinking about a struggling single father who had spent his last $5 to protect the dignity of a stranger he would probably never see again. And somewhere inside her guarded heart, something long buried had begun to breathe. 3 nights passed before Claire Whitmore returned to Rosie's diner, and by then the rain had turned colder, the kind that drifted sideways beneath the streetlights and coated the city in silver reflections. Midnight traffic hissed softly along Interstate 84 while the neon sign outside the diner flickered unevenly against the darkness. Claire sat in her black sedan across the street for nearly 10 minutes before finally stepping out into the freezing air. She had told herself she was only curious. Curious whether the exhausted man from that night was real or simply another fragile moment her grief had invented. But deep down, she already knew the truth. People like Ethan Cole were rare. The bell above the diner door chimed softly when she entered. Warm air smelling of coffee and cinnamon rolled over her immediately. A country song played low from an old jukebox near the back wall. The same tired waitress looked up from the register and recognized her almost instantly. "Table 9?" she asked gently. Claire managed a faint smile. "Guess I made an impression. Hard not to when someone sits staring at coffee for 4 hours." Claire glanced around casually, though her eyes searched only for one person. "The man who paid for my pie," she said quietly. "Does he come in often?" The waitress wiped down the counter slowly. "Ethan?" "Usually after his delivery route." "Tonight too?" Before the waitress could answer, headlights swept briefly across the rain-soaked windows outside. A battered blue pickup rolled into the parking lot with a loud cough from the engine. Claire felt something strange tighten softly inside her chest. Through the glass she watched Ethan climb out wearing a dark hooded jacket damp from the rain. He looked even more tired than before. His shoulders sagged slightly as he bent beside the truck and lifted the hood. Steam curled upward immediately into the freezing night air. "Truck giving him hell again," the waitress muttered sympathetically. Claire stared through the window. Ethan rubbed one hand across his face, then reached carefully into the engine compartment with the calm patience of a man too exhausted to get angry anymore. There was no performance in him. No self-pity. Just quiet endurance. Claire surprised herself by speaking before she could overthink it. "Does he always look that tired?" The waitress sighed softly. "Single dad. 3 jobs. Kid with medical problems." Claire looked back sharply. "Medical problems?" The waitress nodded. "Little girl named Lily. Sweetest kid you ever met." Something about hearing his daughter's name made Ethan suddenly feel more real than before. Not just kind. Not just struggling. Human in the deepest sense of the word. Outside, Ethan slammed the hood shut gently and leaned against the truck for a moment beneath the rain. His breath fogged faintly in the cold air. Claire grabbed her coat without thinking. "Keep the coffee hot," she told the waitress softly. The rain kissed her hair immediately as she stepped outside. Ethan looked up at the sound of approaching footsteps, surprised to see her standing there beneath the flickering diner lights. For half a second neither of them spoke. Rain tapped softly against the hood of the truck between them. Finally Ethan gave a tired smile of recognition. "Table 9." Claire laughed quietly, the sound fragile but real. "I guess that is my official name now." Ethan glanced toward the steaming engine. "Sorry you had to see this glamorous moment." Claire folded her arms against the cold. "Looks expensive." "Everything is expensive lately." He said it lightly, but the exhaustion beneath the words lingered in the air between them. Claire hesitated before reaching into her purse. "At least let me pay you back for the coffee and pie." Ethan shook his head immediately. "You do not owe me anything. Most people would disagree with you." Ethan looked at her carefully then, not at her coat or jewelry or polished appearance, but directly into her eyes. "Most people keep score," he said softly. "I stopped doing that a long time ago." Claire fell silent. Somewhere behind them the diner's neon sign buzzed faintly while cars drifted through the wet highway darkness beyond. Ethan closed the hood completely and wiped grease from his hands with an old rag. "Looks like she will survive another night," he joked quietly. Claire watched him for a long moment before asking the question she had been carrying since the diner. "How do you still stay kind?" Ethan blinked, genuinely confused by the question itself. "Because the world already has enough cruel people," he answered simply. "Seems like somebody should make it easier to breathe." Claire felt her throat tighten unexpectedly. Because standing beneath cold Oregon rain beside a man with barely enough money to fix his truck, she realized something terrifying and beautiful at the same time. Ethan Cole had more peace in his exhausted soul than most billionaires ever found in their entire lives. The next morning arrived wrapped in cold gray clouds and the smell of wet pavement rising from the streets. Portland traffic crawled beneath steady drizzle while Ethan Cole stood inside Warehouse Distribution Center 14 loading delivery crates onto steel carts beneath fluorescent lights that buzzed endlessly overhead. The building smelled like cardboard, diesel fuel, and burnt coffee from the break room down the hall. Men moved around him with tired faces and aching backs, scanning boxes and checking manifests without much conversation. Nobody here had enough energy left for small talk. Ethan adjusted the brace on his sore wrist and lifted another heavy package onto the loading platform. His body felt worn thin from too little sleep and too many jobs stitched together just to survive another month. But every few minutes his mind drifted back to the woman from the diner standing beside his broken truck in the rain. Claire. There had been sadness in her eyes deeper than exhaustion. The kind money could not soften. He caught himself thinking about her smile and immediately shook the thought away. Men drowning in overdue bills did not have time for impossible women with expensive coats and polished voices. Cole. Ethan turned at the sharp sound of his supervisor's voice. Marty Jenkins stood near the clipboard station chewing gum impatiently. You missed overtime sign-up yesterday. Ethan wiped sweat from his forehead. Had to get home to my daughter. Marty grunted. Well, unless your daughter can pay rent, I suggest you stop turning down shifts. Ethan nodded quietly. I will take tonight's route. Good. Marty scribbled something on the clipboard. And your truck registration is overdue again. Parking office already complained. Ethan forced another tired nod even though humiliation burned beneath his ribs. Every corner of his life seemed one payment away from collapse now. Across town, Claire Whitmore sat inside the back seat of a black town car while downtown buildings slid past rain-streaked windows. Her assistant Natalie sat beside her holding a tablet filled with schedules Claire had barely glanced at all morning. You canceled 2 investor meetings. And postponed the acquisition vote, Natalie said carefully. The board is panicking. Claire stared silently outside. Let them panic. Natalie hesitated. Claire, this is not like you. No. It was not. The old Claire Whitmore would have already closed 3 deals before breakfast while balancing conference calls between cities. The old Claire did not spend sleepless nights thinking about tired delivery drivers with kind eyes and worn boots. Claire opened her purse slowly and looked again at the folded diner receipt she still carried everywhere now. Natalie noticed it immediately. What is that? Claire gave the faintest smile. Proof that good people still exist. Natalie looked genuinely confused. Before she could ask more, Claire's phone rang. Daniel Mercer again. Claire answered reluctantly. Please tell me you are coming to the boardroom, Daniel said immediately. Investors flew in from New York. I know. Then where are you? Claire glanced toward the rainy city passing outside. Following a feeling I cannot explain. Silence crackled briefly on the line. Claire, your mother trusted you with this company. Claire's expression softened at the mention of her mother. My mother trusted people, she whispered. I think I forgot how. She ended the call before Daniel could answer. 30 minutes later the town car slowed beside a small elementary school tucked between rain-soaked maple trees and faded brick buildings. Children wearing oversized backpacks hurried through puddles beneath colorful umbrellas while parents waved from crowded sidewalks. Claire sat frozen the second she spotted Ethan's blue pickup parked crookedly near the curb. Ethan stepped out carrying a tiny pink inhaler in one hand and a lunchbox in the other while Lily hurried beside him in a yellow raincoat much too thin for the weather. Claire watched quietly from inside the car as Ethan crouched to zip Lily's jacket all the way to her chin. Big math test today? He asked gently. Lily groaned dramatically. I think numbers are trying to destroy me. Ethan laughed softly for the first time in days. Same here, kiddo. Lily wrapped her arms around his neck before running toward the school entrance. Ethan stayed standing there in the rain watching until she disappeared safely inside. Only then did his tired smile slowly fade. Claire noticed it immediately. The weight returned to his face the moment his daughter could no longer see him. Quiet sacrifice. Quiet fear. Quiet love. Claire felt her chest tighten painfully because for the first time in years she was looking at a man who carried hardship without bitterness. And somewhere deep inside her guarded heart, admiration had already begun turning into something far more dangerous. The rain finally stopped 2 days later, but the cold remained trapped in the city like a weight pressing against every rooftop and empty street. Thin winter sunlight spilled weakly across Portland that afternoon while Ethan Cole hurried through downtown carrying 2 stacked delivery boxes toward a law office near Burnside Avenue. Traffic groaned through wet intersections. Steam drifted from manhole covers. Somewhere nearby, a church bell echoed softly through the gray air. Ethan checked his watch and picked up his pace. He was already 20 minutes behind schedule, and missing deliveries meant losing tips he desperately needed. His phone buzzed inside his jacket pocket just as he reached the curb. Lily's school. Ethan answered immediately. "This is Ethan. Mr. Cole, this is Nurse Patterson from Lincoln Elementary." Her calm voice carried just enough concern to freeze his heartbeat. Lily had trouble breathing during recess. Ethan stopped walking instantly. "Is she okay?" "She is stable now, but her inhaler ran empty." Ethan closed his eyes briefly. "I am on my way." The delivery boxes nearly slipped from his hands as he turned back toward the truck. Horns blared around him while cold winds swept between buildings carrying the smell of rain and diesel fuel. Across the street, Claire Whitmore had just stepped out of a black SUV after another disastrous meeting with attorneys and investors when she noticed him. Even from half a block away she recognized the panic in Ethan immediately. There was something terrifying about watching a calm man suddenly move like the world beneath him was breaking apart. Claire watched him fumble his keys with shaking hands before climbing into the truck. Without thinking, she turned toward her driver. "Follow that pickup." The driver blinked in surprise. "Ma'am? Please." 15 minutes later Claire stood quietly beneath the covered entrance of Lincoln Elementary while cold wind rattled the flagpole overhead. Children's laughter drifted faintly from a distant playground, but inside the nurse's office everything felt tense and small and fragile. Through the narrow window in the door Claire saw Ethan kneeling beside Lily's chair while the school nurse explained medication instructions. Lily looked pale beneath the fluorescent lights, her small shoulders wrapped tightly in a blanket. Ethan listened carefully, nodding after every sentence even though exhaustion carved shadows beneath his eyes. "I should have replaced it sooner," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Mr. Cole," the nurse said gently, "you are doing your best." Ethan smiled faintly, but it looked painfully tired. "Some days my best feels pretty small." Claire felt something twist quietly inside her chest. She had spent years surrounded by powerful men who measured strength in numbers and control and expensive suits. But standing there watching Ethan brush his daughter's hair gently away from her forehead while apologizing for circumstances beyond his control felt more honest than anything she had witnessed in boardrooms worth billions of dollars. A few minutes later Ethan carried Lily carefully through the school hallway toward the exit. Lily rested her head sleepily against his shoulder. "Did I scare you?" she whispered. Ethan kissed the top of her hair softly. "More than you know." "I am sorry." Ethan stopped walking and looked at her seriously. "Hey. Do not apologize for needing help." Claire lowered her eyes immediately because somehow those words landed inside her too. Outside, Ethan settled Lily carefully into the truck while weak winter sunlight reflected across puddles in the parking lot. He looked completely drained now. Like a man carrying more weight than one person should ever hold alone. Claire remained hidden beneath the covered entrance, watching silently as Ethan climbed into the truck and rested both hands against the steering wheel for a long moment before starting the engine. She could not hear him from that distance, but she saw his shoulders tremble once beneath the fading afternoon light. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just one quiet crack in a man trying desperately not to fall apart in front of his little girl. And for the first time since losing her mother, Claire Whitmore felt tears gather in her own eyes, not because of grief or loneliness, but because she was witnessing something heartbreakingly rare in the modern world. A good man quietly reaching the edge of what he could endure. The foreclosure notice arrived on a Thursday morning, taped crookedly to Ethan Cole's apartment door beneath the weak buzz of the hallway light. No envelope. No privacy. Just bold black letters stamped across legal paper for every passing neighbor to see. Final notice of eviction proceedings. Ethan stood frozen outside apartment 3B, still wearing his warehouse uniform, while cold air drifted through the cracked hallway window nearby. For a moment he simply stared at the paper without moving, lunchbox hanging loosely at his side. 10 days had become 3. Somewhere behind another apartment door a television played morning news too loudly. Someone down the hall coughed. Life continued normally while Ethan felt the ground quietly giving way beneath him. Mrs. Alvarez from apartment 2A stepped into the hallway carrying groceries and immediately noticed the notice taped to his door. Her face softened with sympathy. "Oh, Ethan," she whispered. Ethan forced a polite smile that did not reach his eyes. "Morning, Mrs. Alvarez." She glanced toward the paper again. "I am sorry." Ethan nodded once. "Yeah." Lily opened the apartment door before the silence could grow heavier. She wore mismatched socks and held her backpack against her chest. "Daddy, I cannot find my science folder." Then she noticed the notice too. Children always noticed more than adults hoped they would. Her expression changed immediately. "What is that?" Ethan pulled the paper down quickly before she could read it fully. "Nothing you need to worry about." Lily looked unconvinced. "Are we in trouble?" Ethan crouched carefully in front of her despite the ache in his knees. "No matter what happens, you and me are going to be okay." Lily studied his face with the heartbreaking seriousness children develop when life forces them to grow too fast. "Promise?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Promise." Across town, inside a glass conference room overlooking downtown Portland, Claire Whitmore sat silently while board members argued around her about acquisition deadlines and investor confidence. Voices overlapped sharply beneath recessed lighting and polished steel architecture. "We cannot delay this another week. Stock projections are already slipping. The media is starting to speculate." Claire barely heard any of it. Because hidden beneath the folder in front of her was a photograph Natalie had quietly obtained that morning. Ethan standing outside his apartment holding the foreclosure notice while trying to shield Lily from seeing it. Claire stared at the image so long the room around her disappeared completely. Daniel Mercer noticed first. "Claire?" She looked up slowly. "What?" Daniel exchanged worried glances with the board. "We asked if you approved the acquisition terms." Claire closed the folder gently. Meeting adjourned. The room fell silent. One board member blinked in disbelief. "Excuse me?" Claire stood calmly and gathered her coat. "I said we are done for today." "Claire," another executive snapped, "this company does not stop because you are emotional." Claire turned toward him slowly, her voice quiet enough to silence the entire room. "No. It stops when people forget what matters." She walked out before anyone could answer. 2 hours later Claire sat inside her SUV across the street from Ethan's apartment complex while light snow drifted softly through the gray afternoon sky. She watched Ethan carry grocery bags up the cracked concrete stairs while Lily skipped beside him trying to make him smile. Ethan smiled back every single time she looked at him, even though exhaustion still hung from his shoulders like weight he could no longer hide. Claire's driver glanced into the rearview mirror carefully. "Ma'am, should I pull around?" Claire shook her head faintly. "Not yet." Because she understood something now that terrified her. Ethan Cole would never ask for help. Men like him quietly broke themselves trying to protect everyone else first. Her phone buzzed. Daniel Mercer again. Claire answered softly. I ran the numbers, Daniel said immediately. The medical debt alone is over $180,000. Claire stared out at Ethan helping Lily carry a tiny grocery bag much too proudly for its size. And the apartment? 3 months behind. Daniel paused. Claire, if you intervene directly now, he is going to know somebody investigated his life. Claire's eyes drifted toward the wrinkled diner receipt still resting beside her on the seat. He spent his last $5 protecting a stranger's dignity, she whispered. I am not going to let the world punish him for that. Outside the apartment building, Ethan suddenly stopped halfway up the stairs and gripped the railing tightly. His shoulders dipped for just a second beneath the falling snow before he straightened again and smiled at Lily like nothing was wrong. But Claire saw it. She saw the exhaustion. The fear. The quiet breaking point approaching one unpaid bill at a time. And somewhere deep beneath the polished armor of billionaire boardrooms and corporate power, Claire Whitmore made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Saturday morning arrived unnaturally quiet. Snow covered the edges of the parking lot outside Ethan Cole's apartment building in thin, uneven patches while pale winter sunlight reflected softly across frozen puddles and rusted railings. The city itself seemed to hold its breath beneath the cold sky. Ethan woke before dawn as usual, pulled on his warehouse jacket, and stepped carefully into the kitchen trying not to wake Lily asleep on the couch bed nearby. The apartment heater rattled weakly against the cold. He opened the refrigerator slowly and stared at the nearly empty shelves while calculating which bills could wait another week. Rent could not. Medicine could not. The truck payment definitely could not. His phone buzzed suddenly against the counter. Unknown number. Ethan answered cautiously. Hello? Good morning, Mr. Cole. The voice belonged to a calm older man speaking with careful professionalism. My name is Harold Bennett from Bennett & Pierce Financial Services. I would like to confirm your availability this morning regarding your outstanding accounts. Ethan closed his eyes briefly. Another collector. Look, he said quietly, I am doing everything I can. Yes, sir, the man replied politely. That is actually why I am calling. Ethan frowned in confusion. What? Papers shuffled softly on the other end. Your medical debt with St. Mary's Hospital has been resolved in full. Ethan stood completely still. I think you have the wrong person. Ethan Cole. Apartment 3B. Outstanding balance $183,411. Ethan gripped the edge of the counter tightly. That is impossible. It has been paid, sir. Silence filled the kitchen except for the old heater clicking weakly against the cold. Ethan stared at the faded linoleum floor trying to process the words. Who paid it? I am not authorized to disclose client identity. Ethan shook his head slowly even though the man could not see him. No. No, there has to be some mistake. There is no mistake, Mr. Cole. Additionally, your apartment debt and vehicle loan have also been settled. Ethan's breath caught sharply. What? You are debt-free, sir. The words landed like something unreal. Something impossible. Ethan lowered himself slowly into the kitchen chair because suddenly his legs no longer felt steady beneath him. Across the room Lily stirred sleepily beneath her blanket. Daddy, she whispered. Ethan could barely answer. Yeah, sweetheart. Why are you crying? Ethan touched his face in stunned confusion and realized tears had already slipped free without him noticing. Before he could answer, movement outside the apartment window caught Lily's attention. She hurried toward the glass barefoot. In her pajamas and gasped softly. Daddy, Ethan stood slowly and joined her at the window. 12 black SUVs sat lined quietly along the curb outside the apartment building beneath drifting snowflakes. Neighbors had already gathered near the parking lot whispering in confusion while men in dark coats moved carefully between vehicles carrying folders and sealed envelopes. The hallway outside apartment 3B suddenly filled with footsteps and murmuring voices. Then came a gentle knock at the door. Ethan opened it cautiously to find an older woman in a navy coat smiling warmly beside two attorneys holding leather portfolios. Mrs. Alvarez stood halfway down the hall clutching her grocery bag in complete disbelief. "Mr. Cole?" the woman asked kindly. Ethan nodded slowly. "Yes." She extended a cream-colored envelope toward him. "These are the final confirmation documents regarding your debt relief accounts and educational trust transfer for your daughter." Ethan stared at her blankly. "Educational what?" One attorney opened the folder carefully. "A fully funded college trust has been established for Lily Cole effective immediately." Lily looked up at her father in shock. "College?" Ethan could barely form words now. "Who is doing this?" The woman smiled softly but said nothing. She simply handed him one final item from the folder. A small folded diner receipt. 1 coffee. 1 slice of apple pie. Ethan's entire expression changed the second he recognized it. The hallway around him seemed to disappear completely while snow drifted silently outside the apartment windows. Somewhere deep inside, realization arrived quietly all at once. Not because of the money. Not because of the SUVs or attorneys or impossible generosity. But because only one person in the world would understand why that receipt mattered. And standing there in the middle of a crumbling apartment hallway with tears gathering silently in his exhausted eyes, Ethan Cole finally understood that one quiet act of kindness on a rainy midnight had somehow reached the lonely heart of a woman powerful enough to change lives. 1 year later, rain tapped gently against the wide front windows of a small coffee shop tucked beside a quiet Portland side street glowing gold beneath hanging Edison lights. The wooden sign above the entrance read Table 9 in clean white letters, simple and warm against the dark evening sky. Inside, the air smelled of fresh espresso, cinnamon pastries, and old books resting on shelves that lined the brick walls from floor to ceiling. Soft jazz drifted quietly through hidden speakers while customers sat beneath amber light reading novels or speaking in low peaceful voices. It did not feel like the kind of place people rushed through. It felt like the kind of place people breathed again. Behind the counter, Ethan Cole poured steamed milk carefully into a ceramic cup while Lily sat near the front window sketching in a notebook beside a half-finished hot chocolate. She looked healthier now. Stronger. Her cheeks carried color again, and every so often she hummed softly to herself without realizing it. Ethan glanced toward her and smiled automatically the way fathers do when they finally sleep without fear waking them in the middle of the night. The bell above the shop door chimed softly as another customer stepped inside out of the rain. Ethan looked up instinctively, then froze for half a second. Claire Whitmore lowered her umbrella slowly and smiled at him from beneath the soft glow of the hanging lights. Time had changed something in her too. The sharp guarded sadness she once carried like armor had softened into something quieter now. Peace perhaps. Or healing. Ethan set the coffee cup down carefully. "You are late," he said gently. Claire hung her coat near the entrance. "Traffic." Lily immediately jumped from her seat and hurried across the shop. "Claire." Claire laughed softly as Lily wrapped her arms around her waist. "Hey, kiddo." Ethan watched them together for a moment while rain whispered softly against the windows behind them. Some miracles arrived loudly with cameras and headlines. Others arrived quietly and stayed. Claire walked toward the counter while Ethan reached automatically for a clean mug before she even ordered. "Still black coffee?" he asked. Claire leaned lightly against the counter. "Only if there is pie." Ethan smiled faintly. "Apple?" "Always." He served her the coffee and warm pie on a ceramic plate exactly the way he had 1 year earlier inside Rosie's diner, except this time there was no loneliness sitting between them. Claire wrapped both hands around the coffee mug slowly. "You kept the receipt," Ethan said quietly after a moment. Claire looked up at him over the steam rising between them. "I almost lost everything after my mother died," she admitted softly. "The company. Myself. My faith in people." Ethan listened silently. Claire reached into her purse and placed the wrinkled diner receipt carefully on the counter between them. Then one exhausted single father spent his last $5 on a stranger nobody else wanted to notice. Ethan lowered his eyes briefly. "You changed my life." Claire shook her head gently. "No," her voice softened. "You reminded me who I wanted to be before money made everything complicated." Silence settled warmly between them while customers murmured quietly nearby and snow mixed gently with rain outside the windows now. Ethan finally looked back at her. "Why did you really help me?" Claire smiled through eyes shining softly beneath the golden lights. "Because when I looked broken," she whispered, "you treated me like I still mattered." Ethan felt something catch quietly in his chest because no amount of money or rescued debt could compare to hearing those words from someone who understood loneliness as deeply as he did. Lily suddenly appeared beside them holding her sketchbook proudly. "Look what I drew." Claire and Ethan leaned closer together instinctively. The drawing showed a tiny diner beneath neon lights, rain falling outside, and two strangers sitting across from each other at a small table with coffee between them. Above the picture Lily had written carefully in crooked letters, "Sometimes kindness finds you back." Claire covered her mouth softly, emotional laughter escaping before she could stop it. Ethan smiled down at the drawing for a long moment. Outside, the storm drifted quietly through the Portland night while inside Table 9 warmth glowed against every shadow. And somewhere between fresh coffee, healing hearts, and one little girl finally free to dream about the future again, two lonely people realized that sometimes the smallest act of kindness does not just save a life. Sometimes it leads you home.